a South Asian Canadian channel.
And you're watching Channel Y.
The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media. Y Media has newspaper, midweek, radio, South Asian Pulse.
Hi, I'm Amitabh Bachchan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
Hi, this is Amir Khan and you're listening to South Asian Pulse.
अब हर दिन सुने GTA का #1 रेडियो स्टेशन FM 91.9
Television. You are watching Channel Y. Channel Y.
Prime Minister, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Online, SouthAsianDaily.com. The biggest South Asian media group, Y Media.
This part of the program is brought to you by Midweek Newspaper, published every Tuesday.
Hello and welcome to the Editor's Take. I am Ramona Singh and joining me is Jadoo Jaswal, the group editor of Y Media. Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Ramona ji. Thank you so much.
So this week we saw a very big deal happen between Trudeau and Singh, the leader of the Liberal Party, the Prime Minister, and the leader of the NDP party. They made a deal that will affect Canadians, that affects not only just their parties, but the rest of us until 2025. What is this supply and confidence deal that they put together?
I think just for our viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you that this is a minority government right now. And in a minority government, of course, you need the support of different parties. And in this case, I think the Liberals, for their passing their budget, because budget is definitely a confidence vote, or for any other confidence vote, they will need support of at least one party. That's how the numbers are stacked up right now. So they would need the support of any one party. So here, the Liberals, they've made a deal with NDP, that NDP, this is a supply and confidence deal, the NDP will be supporting the Liberal Party up until June 2025. That's when the Parliament session is over, for June 2025. Just in case they didn't have this deal, of course, it was on case-to-case basis, which has happened so many times earlier as well, even during the last Parliament that we saw. Liberals were in minority, the Trudeau Liberals were in minority, and then it was case-to-case basis. But now here it is. Now, what does that deal say? The interesting part is it was the NDP who initiated the deal right after the September elections that we had last year. And Jagmeet Singh, he went to the Prime Minister discussing this, and they were quite receptive to this deal. This deal clearly says this, that yes, you should have these components, and a copy of that deal or the draft has been issued to us media members as well, which says is that yes, the dental plan, that has to be included. Just as we all know, our medical is free right now, but we have to pay for our dental services. So that will be taken care by the government. Of course, it's going to be done in phases, first for 12 years or younger in 2022, then 2023. You'll have 18 years or younger, then person with disabilities. But by 2025, yes, everybody will be covered under this dental deal. Then there is pharma care. You may not have to pay for your medicines in future, which is, of course, a major cost for many households, especially with people with underlying health concerns. So they have to spend a lot of their budget in this medicine. That's another part. Then there are other components as well. The labor component is there, the environment component is there, housing affordability is there. Though there are not many details. When we read the document, there are not many details. There are certain points that how the affordability will be taken care. Now the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he says this, we've done this deal for stability. That's what their justification is for doing this deal. They're saying that there is a war going on right now, then there's COVID, so we've done this for stability. If you ask Jagmeet Singh, he says definitely we wanted to achieve something. In short span of time, it's difficult for the government to achieve anything, so we've given them that stability now, what they were looking for, and we tried these things to be done for the betterment of the Canadians. Of course, the opposition is furious because the Conservatives, they have been literally shut out because until 2025, the Liberals don't need the Conservatives. They may not even need the Bloc right now. So they are quite furious right now, and they're saying, no, this deal is not at all good. And not only this deal is with the no confidence vote or the confidence vote, but this also includes the committees as well, which is very important. Then the Liberals and the NDP, they get to control the agenda at the committees.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. In a minority government, the no confidence vote would trigger an election. Yeah. And so this way, it looks like Trudeau can keep anybody from triggering an election, and perhaps he thinks that he wouldn't be good in terms of getting a majority in an early election, earlier than 2025. And I guess this is Singh's way of saying that I may never become prime minister, but I have these priorities that I want to meet. But what does it mean for now if we go into a re-election in 2025? For NDP, it looks like now this was a Liberal, plan. The Liberals were in government, the Liberal cabinet ministers, and the Liberals did all of this. Does that mean that the NDP then starts fading more and more into the background?
I think the question is for both of them actually, and let's talk about the NDP since you've asked about NDP first. I think there are two viewpoints right now. One is, as you just mentioned, is NDP fading down? But to their defense, I think they say this, that yes, at least we could leave some sort of legacy, that this is what we've been able to accomplish, whether it was the dental plan. There are many people who are having challenges with covering up their dental plans, and then there's Medicare as well, and maybe other than the pharma care, the child care, which we all know child care, usually this is towards the left now, and they're saying yes, we brought the Liberals from center towards the left because all this child care, dental care, pharma care, from top to bottom, everything is being funded by the government. These were all basically NDP policies, and here we have Liberals accepting the childcare. They've accepted even before this elections. Environment, then housing affordability. The only thing they could differ on, especially after the Brussels meeting with the NATO leaders, is the defense spending, because. And I've asked this question to Harjit Sajjan when he was a defense minister, Anita Anand, she's the current defense minister right now, that why are we aiming from our $19-20 billion, the budget, Russia has a budget of $35 billion, and here we also want to match that budget, $33-35 billion. But the pressure is from NATO to have 2% of the defense budget for sure. So now here it is now, this is the only area where they will differ. But to NDP's defense, they will want to claim that yes, these are the things that we were able to achieve. And for Liberals, my question is, and I want your viewpoint on this one as well, why would they even have this deal? Because I doubt NDP can afford to have any elections right now, looking at their finances, and then they just need one party support. NDP would have supported them on case-to-case basis anyways. And having the luxury of covering many minority elections. I knew Harper since he was as the leader of the official opposition, and I followed him. I met him many times personally. I interviewed him many times personally, and I've always given this credit to Harper. The way he managed, I would listen to this again and again. These were very early days in my journalism career, that a minority government wouldn't last them more than 18 months. But here's this guy. He leads the minority government. He just got one majority. But he was there for a good 10 years. So why would they need this deal?
Well, that's a great question, because the NDP has not just supported them case by case, like literally has supported them on everything, right? They make it look like it's case by case, but there hasn't been one thing that the NDP hasn't supported them on, which even the latest thing, such as invoking the Emergencies Act, which was a big deal when it came to, the NDP saying something like that and saying, we only justify it for the protesters in Ottawa for the occupation, but we wouldn't do it for anybody protesting pipelines, for example. So they even said, our bases are biased in a way. So yes, we saw Jagmeet Singh constantly support him. So that's a good question. Now it makes to think that I agree with the Bloc leader when he said this is a false majority. This gives Justin Trudeau a cushion where nobody can trigger an election, right? And you're right, in a minority government, if you miss committee or something moves, you can go into it. And we know that the Conservatives are getting a new leader in place, but they always out fundraise the other parties. So chances are that they probably think that Conservatives will be ready very soon after they have a new leader after September 10th. And then they're always outperforming in fundraising. But also, it also brings another question, is that could it be that the Liberal Party and the people who have leadership aspirations, this prevents them from conspiring and putting out their aspirations to be able to become the leader of the Liberal Party? So in a way, is this Justin Trudeau's way of clinging onto power regardless of anything else, because he also stops anybody in the Liberal Party? Krista Freeland, who is Prime Minister in waiting as Deputy Prime Minister, biggest roles in finance minister. She's done literally everything to show that I'm ready to lead this country as Prime Minister, as the leader of the Liberal Party. So could it be something like that? And it looks more so because this is also the same Prime Minister who went into an election only 2 years after the 2019 minority, and then in the middle of a pandemic, and it was right in the middle of what happened in Afghanistan and the war there and how Canadians had to be pulled out. So he showed then that it didn't matter to go into an election, because I think he thought he would be prepared to get a majority. Now it looks bleaker and bleaker in terms of his favorability. I mean, this past week he was in Europe and he had some opposition from the European Union members of parliament who spoke against his invoking the Emergencies Act. So his sunny ways have disappeared since 2015, and yes, doing this deal will make sure that he's prime minister for 10 years, which is a big record to have, and under that time frame he can do what he likes. So this is, if you're looking for a Machiavellian character, I think we have Mr. Trudeau to look at.
Yeah, I think two sides to this coin, as usual. One, as you just mentioned, that yes, of course, you could think that he's trying to keep the other leadership contenders away. But then there's another point to it. It's not for Justin Trudeau by himself to decide. And in any party, whether it's NDP or whether it's Liberals or whether even for that matter the Conservatives. Look how Stéphane Dion won the election, but eventually who became the leader? It was Michael Ignatieff, because it was not for Stéphane Dion to keep his leadership. Aaron O'Toole had the same issues. He wanted to be the leader right up until the last moment. Andrew Scheer wanted to be the leader right up until the last moment. Yeah,
but he's prime minister, and when you're prime minister, it's a lot harder for your cabinet and your caucus to vote you out as prime minister. Although we've seen that happen to like Margaret Thatcher when she was prime minister, and what happened with the Conservative Party then. But the Liberals seem to always fall in line, and this is another way that he's made them fall in line even more.
I think you've given the perfect example. Iron Lady, here she was fighting with all those unions, and then suddenly her own party, they ejected her out. And since you're talking of England, I'll again quote another thing, Winston Churchill. I mean, this guy was the World War II hero. I mean, this guy won them the World War. And here he was again let down by his own party members. So it's not, sitting prime ministers have their issues as well. And then if the base, the caucus, or the party leaders who decide that yes, maybe we are running out of time, Trudeau is not the one who can really win us the majority, because twice he's brought them just two minorities. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I would agree to that point, but the thing is, he made a deal on his own. He didn't. The way it was presented in the media is Justin Trudeau did a deal with Jagmeet Singh. It wasn't the Liberal Party did a deal with the NDP, and this is the outcome of the deal. This was two leaders sitting together, deciding the fate of their government and Canadians, the 38 million of us, and saying they did a deal. And then, so it also raises questions like, what does your caucus think in terms of agendas? Now you have, the pharmacare and dental care, a lot of things that are very under the jurisdiction of the province has become a federal, focus in terms of policy and spending. But now, what did your cabinet ministers think? Did you, it was only 6 months ago that you sent out letters to your cabinet ministers saying that this is a trajectory of what they should be focused on, and none of them included this deal. So it looks like he did a deal to save himself and then said, hey, I'm prime minister, I'm also the leader of this party, and this is what we're going to do. So I don't know how those internal caucus meetings or the cabinet meeting turned out on that, but it was not presented as a party to party. It was presented as two gentlemen meeting and making a decision for the rest of Canada and for their parties, which is also the NDP and MPs also had some reservations about this as well, because it was Singh's decision.
Yeah, actually both the caucuses had some reservations. So we all know that yes, there were some long discussions within the Liberal caucus as well, and yes, there were questions as well. Just as I asked, they asked that why would we even need a deal? This was the question, and that's what prompted, I'm sure, Candice Bergen to provoke or prompt them that, hey guys, the constituents must ask their MPs and the MPs must ask their leader, as much as they would want to, but I doubt anything is going to come out, because I know that when the parties are run, it's run by a very small group which leads the party, and we've even coined a term for the backbencher cabinet ministers. Why I call them the backbencher cabinet ministers? Because of course they're not backbenchers; they still sit in the front benches. But it's only the few who are really taking the party head, or they call the shots. And there are other cabinet ministers that just sitting there in the cabinet, and then there are MPs who are just there just to say yes, and the major decisions are being made by a very select group, and that's what happens.
Yeah. And I think for Singh, I think this was also his way. He knows there's a leadership review at some point. He's already been to 2 elections, and each election they have come away with less seats than the previous election. I mean, in 2015, the NDP was the official opposition, right, for that before that election. And under Singh, they've just had smaller and smaller government, with the bloc becoming almost third place. And so it also shows that, you know, this is almost the end of Singh's time as leader of the NDP, and he probably wants to have certain accomplishments, and who knows what his journey in the political world is going to be, what his plans are after that when he's no longer, you know, leader of the NDP party, if they decide to vote and replace him, because it's always based on performance. And this is his way of saying, hey, listen, I got this done, even though we have fewer and fewer seats with every election.
Yeah, right. Not only it works well for Jagmeet Singh, you're right that it works well for him, because fewer and fewer seats, 25 seats are not going to turn to a majority or even minority government for them. That was Jack Layton in 2011. That's the last time we saw that orange wave. And I think this works well for Justin Trudeau as well, because now here, say for instance, if he leaves the party in a year or 2's time, what sort of legacy has he left behind? I mean, you did get a majority in 2015, but after that, the party is not that stable. This is because I've seen minorities work as I was discussing during Stephen Harper's time, and there was a much stronger opposition at that time. You had very strong leaders who were aspiring to become the leaders, whether it was Michael Ignatieff, whether it was Stéphane Dion, Judy Seguro, Joe Walpe, all these were very strong leaders. It was a very hostile opposition. Jack Layton, look at him. I mean, he didn't leave Paul Martin, just the sponsorship scandal came out and he pulled the plug. So this would have been much more easier, but I think it's more about setting up some sort of legacy for Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, and so what does this mean for Canadians when it comes to, like, a lot of economists are now saying weary of the mass spending that will take place in the next 4 budgets, now that this is the NDP agenda that the Liberals will put out, right? And this would have to be Chrystia Freeland if she remains finance minister, which I think she might, for those 4 budgets. They're going to put out an agenda. So what does it look in terms of spending? We know the stuff that they're going to do, but what does it mean for the entire economy?
I think depends upon which side of the fence you are.
Yeah.
If you're on this side of the fence, having a socialist agenda, you want country heading towards that direction, towards the left, government sponsors everything, then of course you want to like this idea. You want to say, yes, this is great, and you're going to like this idea. But if you're sitting on the other side of the fence, which you want to be fiscally responsible, we've all had regular deficits, and we're sitting on a major debt right now. So if you're talking about deficits and debts, then of course you're going to question this deal. But here's a very interesting point that I want to bring on the discussion. How would conservatives differentiate themselves? You could easily swap their 2019 manifestos, or even otherwise as well. You won't find a difference. If we're talking about being fiscally responsible, I heard Pierre Poilievre saying that, but then no other candidate is talking about being fiscally responsible. And the last time I saw the costed manifesto, which Aaron O'Toole brought, I mean, we're going to balance the budget in 10 years from now. So 10 years is as much as saying the Liberals don't even say anything right now. When are they going to balance the budget? And the NDP, they didn't bring in a costed manifesto as well. So here we are. These are those times when it's almost a free pass.
Yeah, and I think that there's a reason why Aaron O'Toole's no longer leader of the Conservative Party, because of, you know, the platform he put out there. And I think had he won the election, even though the Conservatives got more votes in 2019 under Andrew Scheer as well as 2021 under Aaron O'Toole, it's just unfortunate the way things go in terms of the calculations per seats, 338 seats. You need to have, like for example, all of Alberta will go Conservative, right? And then, but it's not enough votes because it's based on per riding in those 338. So even though one party may have more votes than another party, it's just about how many seats they win in that layout, in the riding distribution. And so you have that. So I think that's one of the big reasons why he's no longer leader. And now you're seeing, the leadership candidates talk more about conservative values in terms of like the fiscal ability of what does it look like balancing the books, what does it mean in terms of affordability for future generations, because at the end of the day the question is a lot of these programs are great, but how are we going to afford it, and what does that timeline look like, when it comes to debt to GDP ratio, especially after what we've been through with COVID and the government spending that was necessary for the time. But what does that mean overall in the continued spending? And it's interesting because Justin Trudeau in 2015, he ran a campaign on balancing the books, you know, in his final year, but then, you know, running $10 billion worth of deficit and then balancing in the fourth year. And it didn't happen, and it wasn't, you know, he wasn't held accountable in that sense, but he did get a minority. And it just looks like this entire deal, I wonder, even though we call it a democracy, the two people make a deal and pull a fast one over us all. Because at the end of the day, what are elections for? We vote for a party in place, and if a party does not get majority, that's the voters saying, like in the last election, there was what is it, 17.2 million votes were cast, 38 million population, 17.2 million votes. That is a 62.5% voter turnout. It's significant. And they said, you know what, you guys, nobody is going to have majority because we want you guys to debate. And now these two gentlemen did a deal, and it's a fast one on the 17 million people who voted to say, go back and do your homework, and we need you guys all to work together to get things done, and we need opposition parties. And you have the Bloc, you have the official opposition, the Conservatives, who are questioning the government, which is supposed to, you know, they're Her Majesty's official opposition, who's supposed to question, how are you spending, what are you doing on behalf of the taxpayers, right? And now this deal's done, and it's almost a majority, even though that's not what the people voted for. And then the rest of us will see what happens in 2025.
Yeah, to sum up, I can just say 3 points to sum up what you were just mentioning. First, to your point, yeah, you're right. Justin Trudeau, he did announce that, and that was rare. I haven't seen that in any part of the world, whether I cover US elections, Europe, India, Pakistan, Canada. $10 billion deficit budgets. That's what he promised in 2015. But I think that was the first debate, and I said it very early on that this is going to bring him up, and that's what exactly happened. Of course, you're right. I mean, he didn't bring $10 billion deficit budgets. He did bring in $40-50 billion. That was a deficit that we had year after year. That's one point. But, and also after those elections, I mean, you're right, he did get a minority after that. But then again, we seen a spending of $300 billion. But then again, you know, the Canadians handed him a minority. Reason being, to my second point, the Conservatives, they need to make sure that they what do you stand for? What do you stand for? What is your position so different that people get attracted towards you, people vote for you, or you have to create some sort of wave? Because unless you don't do that, you're not going to come back to power in majority. Minority is even difficult. And that will conclude my third point as well, as you were just mentioning. In this draft, there's another point, that is the electoral reforms. So if these electoral reforms are implemented just as the NDP wants them, which is there in this draft, I'm sure you'll see more of minority governments, and it's going to be more difficult for any party to form a majority, especially if the party is not very strong in Ontario and Quebec. So that's another challenge for Conservatives.
Absolutely. And so thanks for all your insight. That is all the time we have for the Editor's Take. Join us every weekend as we tackle new issues with Group Editor Yudhvir Jaswal.
Thank you. Player.